Thank you. Chair, this morning we will be hearing live evidence from D643.
Thank you very much.
I swear by Almighty God
That the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
So if I can just begin by saying you'll understand why I'm not going to refer to you by your name, and no disrespect is intended by that. I'll just refer to you as Sir. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Moore.
Thank you. Thank you for attending today. You have also provided a detailed witness statement to the inquiry, which is at DL 0000228. Chair, you should have it at your tab 1. And that has been adduced, which means we can consider it in full. It also means that today I'm not going to ask you about everything in your statement. We already have that. I'm going to focus this morning on the topics where the inquiry would like to hear more from you, and the Chair may also have questions for you as we go along. I appreciate that some of this will be difficult to talk about, so if you need a break, please do say. So just by way of introduction, you joined the British Army in 2001. Would that have been as a Commonwealth soldier?
Yes, ma'am.
How long did you serve?
11 and a half years, nearly 12.
And you did tours in Kosovo, Bosnia and Iraq?
Yes.
You were discharged, I think, in August 2012?
Yes.
An important part of your experience at Brookhouse is the way in which your medical conditions were managed in detention. Now, you've given the details in your statement, which we have in full, so rather than take you through it, if you don't mind, I'll deal with it in this way, by way of a summary, so you can correct me if I'm wrong or if there's anything else to add. As a result of a number of traumatic combat-related incidents you witnessed while serving, you developed post-traumatic stress disorder, which began while you were serving in around 2007 and continued. You were hospitalised in Germany in 2011 as a result of an attempted overdose, and you spent about 3 weeks in hospital. I don't need to put them on screen, but you've quoted in your statement, which is at paragraph 18, an entry by a psychiatrist in May 2015 who assessed you along with an NHS veteran lead, and your diagnosis then was post-traumatic stress disorder. I understand that you agree with that diagnosis. We'll come in more detail to periods of detention in Brookhouse and elsewhere, but a recurring theme in your statement is that some aspects of being in detention exacerbated your PTSD, and which was things like the sounds of doors banging, some of the detained persons being from countries where you'd served, and also fights and physical confrontations in detention, which reminded you of combat. I'll ask a little more about the support you've had and the support that you asked for and what you told people about your condition, but is that a fair summary to begin with?
Yes, ma'am.
So we're here to talk about your time in Brookhouse, and we're particularly looking at the period of filming for Panorama, which was April to August 2017. You were there that whole time?
Yes, ma'am.
But you had 4 periods of detention, in fact, at Brookhouse. The first 3 were in 2016, and then the longest period was from December 2016 to May 2018.
Yes, ma'am.
So looking at the initial detention periods, which is 15th of June to the 8th of July 2016, and then the 10th to the 16th of August 2016, those first times you were detained towards the end of a prison sentence, and you understood that the plan was to remove you back to your home country before your sentence was up.
Yes, ma'am.
Thinking not just about the first time, but in fact each time you got to Brookhouse, I want to ask about induction, and this is in your statement at page 5, paragraph 22, if you want to remind yourself. And you should have your statement, by the way, there in front of you. It's at tab 1. So you arrive in the building on your first day at Brookhouse, either of the times. What information are you given about Brookhouse on arrival?
So I haven't really get any information prior going there. But when I arrived, meet at the front desk, they take my stuff from the front desk and they tell me to sit. And nothing else, and you wait for a long period of time. And after a long period of time, they came and they ask you fill out some forms. One of the things that I've noticed when I was there, there's lots of books and magazines there, and there's some reading in different languages about the induction. But nobody explained these to you.
Were you shown around the centre?
No.
And did you have sort of presentations or talks about how things worked in the centre?
No, they just ask you a bit of questions, like a questionnaire. about your medical and stuff like that.
So that was your sort of healthcare induction.
Yeah.
And you described this in your statement at paragraph 25 as a tick box exercise.
Yes.
What do you mean by that?
They'll ask you a series of questions and they'll tick it off.
And was that the same on each of the 4 times you were
Yes.
inducted? So your first healthcare note from your healthcare statement, from your statement that deals with healthcare, was on the 15th of June 2016, so the day that you first arrived. But then you have another note on the 17th of June, which is in your statement at paragraph 29. Do you want to just open it so you have it in front of you if you do need to glance down at it? So it should be tab 1. I'm looking at page 6. That note says that you self-reported, so you went to healthcare yourself and asked to be seen. It says that you reported having a history of post-traumatic disorder, PTSD. So that means, I think, self-reporting means you went to healthcare, turned up and asked for an appointment. Reported PTSD, and then 3 days later, there's another note where you told a different nurse about the overdose attempt in 2011, which I mentioned, that you struggled to sleep due to flashbacks, only sleeping for 1 to 2 hours a night. And these are recorded in your healthcare notes. And something called an emotional health group was discussed with you.
Yes.
Was that something that you were willing to attend?
Yes. One of the reasons why I was going to healthcare is that it doesn't matter what help.
Sarah, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. We've got a problem with the transcript, the live transcript. So can I just ask you to pause for one moment while we see if we can sort that out?
Thank you.
We're hoping it'll be a quick fix, but if not, we will.
So do we need to rise?
I'm doing a backup recording on the voice next door as well, so hopefully we can get it from the audio at the end of the day. But I just thought I should let them know because she's just got a blue screen with no picture at the moment.
Okay, we probably need to stop for a moment just to try and
Yes,
sort it out.
the chaps next door who are doing the audio and video have restarted it and said it should be okay.
Thank you. So we have a bit of a delay with the video. Hopefully we can catch up, but I would suggest we just rise for 5 minutes and see if we can catch up now and then get going with the
Absolutely.
live audio. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My apologies. Thank you.
Thank you. I understand that the transcription has now been resolved, so we should be live, and we were just discussing the emotional health group. So we were looking at a note at the top of page 7 of your witness statement, and I asked you whether that was something that you were willing to attend at the time.
Yes, as I was saying, when I went there to ask for help, for me, in my mind, I didn't really care where the help come from. So as soon as I heard about that, I was willing to participate.
Did you know what sort of group it would be, or just that it might be some help?
I didn't know which group it would be, but I know it's moving in the right direction for help.
And during your first period of detention at Brookhouse, you were placed on E-wing. And I think you believe that was because your removal was planned to be quite soon. You described the atmosphere on E-wing as tense due to the type of detained people there and the mixture of detained people there. What do you mean by that?
On E-wing, there's about nine cells, and there's another room where they would keep people who appear to have mental issues. And they would be shouting, singing, banging, and screaming, "Get me out of here!" And it was, for me, it was very, very disturbing. But one of the things that I couldn't understand, because I've worked in, I detained people before. This was part of my job when I was on tour, so I know a little bit about detention. And one of the things about detention, you have to take your job seriously. And when I see people shouting and banging and screaming for help, and I see officers standing in the corridor and laughing, as if the situation is a joke, that was a bit disturbing to me. Also, the banging wasn't helping me as well.
The banging, particularly on E-wing, because of your symptoms. And I think you mentioned also hearing flights was distressing.
Ah, yes. The first time, it wasn't so distressing to me, because I've been back and forth from prison expecting me to go. But more and more I stay longer in the detention center, then situations started to change.
If we stay with, so when you're on E-wing, your directions were cancelled, so obviously you weren't removed at that time. You were moved then onto the normal residential
Yes.
wing. And more generally, and later in your statement, so from page 44, but you don't need to turn to it, you speak generally about Brookhouse. Not just the first time you were there, but overall, can you tell us, not on E-wing, but on the residential wing, what was your room like?
My room was just like a prison cell.
Was it a shared room?
Yes, it was a shared room. But one of the things I asked them to not do, because when I first get on a wing, it was a bit surprise to me to see different people from different nations. And one of the things I had an issue of trusting, especially if I'm thinking I'm in a situation where I felt my life is threatened. So there's certain people that was on a wing that was reminding me of the situation when I was at war. So one of the things that I did, I went to the office and I said, "This is my situation and this is what bothered me. Could you please not put me in a cell with certain people, because I would struggle." But when I went to Yemen, they put me in with the very same people that I asked them not to.
And was that people from countries where you'd served while you were in the army? Do you remember who you asked? You said you went to the office. So did you go to the wing office?
Yeah, wing office.
And do you remember who you asked?
No, I don't remember. But I remember, because I've been in the army, I know to go through the ranks. So one of the things I find out who is the head. And normally it would be one of the guys that wear a different color tie than, and he's one of the person that I went to.
And you did end up sharing a room with someone from
Yes.
a country where you'd served. Was that for a long time?
Yeah, for about 3 months.
You also speak at paragraph 161 about an occasion where your roommate set fire to a letter.
Yeah. So there's a culture, in my opinion, and from a lot of other detainees, because we talk when we're at lunch, when we're playing football, when we're in the gym, we talk. And I pay attention. Not only I pay attention to them, but I pay attention because I've been in situations, as I said, where I detain people. And I also been to prison and see all the operations there. And sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yes, I was asking about a time when your roommate set fire to a
Yeah.
letter.
So the culture is that they don't believe you. You go and you make a complaint, and they don't take it seriously, even when you try. So even when you ring your bell from the room, they'll say, "Oh, they're just playing around," and they wouldn't attend. So one night, I was sharing a room with this guy, and I think he had a letter, a visiting letter, and he read it, and he get a lighter, and he lighted it just to get rid of but when he put it in the bin, the paper in the bin started to catch fire. And this time I wasn't so switched on to notice that the window cannot open, and the room started to smoke. And we ringing the bell and talking over the intercom, asking for help, and nobody was coming. At the end, me and him have to put our mouth through the split at the door to breathe. And nobody come until about an hour and a half later. And that was so distressing to me. I was so frightened. Because as I said, I was struggling, and to place in a situation where I couldn't escape, that was really, really hard.
Your room would have been locked at this time.
Yes.
Because it was after night time, so
Yes.
you'd been locked for the night. And did you, I believe you did lodge a complaint about this, it says at 161. You don't have a copy of it. Is that because you filled in a complaints form and put it in a box?
I don't remember how I made the complaint, but most likely it would be that way. Because
Sorry, go on.
Sorry, because the reason why I said most likely it might be that way, I always wanted to write down things so that it would be, it would be there for history.
Mm-hmm. So if we just stay for a moment with the way that you made complaints, and we have a number of examples of that in your statement. So you could make complaints by asking somebody, so you can make sort of informal oral complaints, is that right? Is that something you did?
Yeah, I've made complaint orally, and I make complaint on paper. One of the things that I had stopped do was make complaint orally, because when you make complaint orally, they don't, as I said, they don't take you seriously. It's just you, in my opinion, it's just you or another person who's trying to stop a flight from go. And we don't have access to the headsets. So we'll go to the library, we'll get a complaint form, we'll put it in the box, and we will not hear nothing.
I think you said that you learned how to complete the complaint form from another resident, is
Yes.
that right? Had you seen the complaint boxes around the centre before then, or was that the first time you learned that there was a process?
Well, I used to go to church, and I have this guy who was in before me. And most of the time, a lot of us used to depend on him to give us information. There's a few information around the center. Some of the guy cannot read. Some can't even read in English. And one of the best thing to do is to tell people, and nobody would tell me. But the reason why I feel so serious about that situation is because I've been to another detention center down south, and they're totally different. They'll explain things to you, they'll give you good induction, everything is okay. So when I come to this detention center, it was far contrast to the one I've been to.
Was that the Vern?
The Vaughan, yes.
We'll come to that because it is part of the history that we're going to examine in a little bit of detail. But staying with your first period at Brookhouse, there's a number of occasions in your statement and your documents where you've told healthcare staff that detention's making your PTSD worse. So I won't read them all out, but for example, you cover at paragraph 36, which is on page 8, Nurse Dowd on the 27th of June 2016, who records D643 attended the group for the first time today. So this is the emotional support group that we mentioned. He made positive contributions but expressed his concern with regard to getting help for PTSD. Being in Brookhouse is increasing his symptoms. So this is the group that you mentioned, and you didn't know what it was, and obviously you've gone along now. Without giving anybody's names or specific details, what sort of reasons would people attend this group for?
So when I went to the mental health nurse, they said this group and this might probably help you. So I attend. But when I attend, people were more concerned about flight and concerned how to get, even in that group, how to get information that they needed, vital information. So I'm saying to myself, this is not helping me. This is my situation further, because I have this situation and people are talking about going home, talking about their family, and that is even reminding me about that situation as well. So it wasn't really helping me.
Was there anything done within this group that was focused on, for example, PTSD or trauma type symptoms?
No.
And she said here in this note that I've just referred to, that the being at Brookhouse is increasing your symptoms. Is that because you had told her that that was the case?
Yes, I told her.
And do you know why at this time, other than what you've just said about the group, why being at Brookhouse was making you feel worse?
Just some of the things that I've seen there. For instance, fighting. I see detainees fight each other, and sometimes it can get bigger and bigger. And for me, I've trained to, when I see a situation, either I attack the situation or I get away from the situation or do something about it. And it was very frightening to see these things. But the unexpected noise, sometimes I'll be in a room with some unexpected noise and I just go on the ground for cover. And not because I planned it, it's just because my body would react to it. And not only that, when I do that, other people around me, they didn't understand what I was going through, so they were laughing.
Your records show that you told the healthcare team that you'd been getting PTSD therapy while you're in prison.
Yes.
Was any similar support available at Brookhouse?
No, none of the above.
And a note from Karen Churcher on the 6th of July 2016, which you've quoted at paragraph 43 of your statement, says that you were unwilling to attend the emotional support group, felt there was no benefit, and unwilling to accept techniques that were taught to you. Is that fair?
I didn't want to go back, but there was no technique there. There was no technique. When we go to that emotional group, because I went to that emotional group about 5 times, and I decided to stop because it was not helping me. But what I find, the people who were there to help you was just listening. They weren't giving any comeback. Everybody was talking, making their point, and they were listening. And there was no suggestion or anything. And I said, but why am I going there when it's not helping me? So I did not go back.
You say in your statement, this is from page 11, paragraph 45, that you learnt while at Brookhouse what a Rule 35 report was. How did you learn about Rule 35?
Just from other detainees.
And we see from your records, and they're quoted verbatim in paragraph 46, which is at page 11 of your statement, that you saw Dr. Puvanendran on the 7th of July 2016. And the record says, came for Rule 35, and then in brackets, unfit for detention. Says he has suffered combat stress, and then gives some details about the British Army and what happened there. And you'd obviously discussed combat stress and the nature of the events which happened, which gave rise to PTSD as they're recorded here, although the words PTSD are not used. It says in that excerpt, says what he really wants is to access the combat stress services, advise that he is not unfit for detention or prison, and he can access these services once he is released. And no Rule 35 report was written. Do you recall whether the doctor asked about your symptoms rather than just the history of what happened?
The doctor wasn't listening to me. The doctor said, I'm trying to explain. She asked me about torture, suffering. I've said, no, I haven't been into this type of situation. But being inside here, I'm feeling like I'm mentally tortured. And then I was trying to explain to her why. And she wasn't giving me the opportunity to explain why. She was saying, if it's not this, and if it's not that, then you can't get this. And I said, well, can you please at least listen to me? And she wasn't having it. So I left there crying, very emotional.
And you did make a complaint about this on the 7th of July 2016.
Yes.
And I think this is where you discuss in your statement that another detainee had helped you to understand how to make complaints.
Yeah.
So you say you didn't get an initial response, and this is covered from paragraph 50 of your statement. So you say you made a complaint the same day, and you mentioned that you made a number of other complaints. And then at 54, you say you refer to a letter which you received in February 2017, so the following year, from an NHS complaints manager, which said, I can advise that a response was received from Brookhouse in January this year. However, this was returned to them for additional information. We had also requested copies of medical records which have not yet been provided. This matter has been escalated to the health head, I think, of the Health and Justice Commissioning team. As soon as we receive the required information from Brookhouse, your complaint will be reviewed by one of our advisors, following which we'll respond to you. I know you don't recall receiving this, but you've now seen it, that's on your file. I don't know if you can be sure that this relates to the first Rule 35 complaint, because it doesn't have any date in it.
Yeah, I've never seen that, no. I heard until I've talked to my solicitors and they let me know about that.
And it says here the complaint will be reviewed, following which you'll respond to you. Did you ever get further response to this letter? So let's go back to summer 2016. So you went back to prison briefly. As I said, your sentence was ongoing. And then you came back to Brookhouse from the 10th to the 16th of August for the second time. And while you were at Brookhouse during these first two periods, you had removal directions on a number of occasions, which then were obviously cancelled. This doesn't relate to events within Brookhouse, but in summary, am I right to say that on release from prison, at the end of your sentence, the detention gatekeeper determined that you could be detained to effect removal, and you were given a choice of waiting for that in immigration detention or in prison? And which one did you choose?
I choose to come to detention centre.
And what was it about coming to an immigration detention centre rather than prison that made you choose that?
Because I thought that the detention centre would be, because as I said, I train to detain people, and I have detained people, so I know a little bit about detention. So I know detention is not prison. And I know in my head that you would probably get treated better in detention centre than in prison, and that's why I make that decision.
While you were in prison, but under immigration powers at one point, you had a psychiatric evaluation.
Yes.
It's quoted at 67. I won't read it out in full, but that's the reference of your statement. In summary, you say at that time you became suicidal, so you're in HMP Exeter at this point.
Yeah.
And began to hoard medication to make a plan to overdose.
Yeah.
In the assessment, it says PTSD is noted, flashbacks, anxiety, panic, and poor sleep have all become worse. And it says condition much worse since came to HMP Exeter from Immigration Detention Centre. Is it true that it was worse when you'd gone to HMP Exeter compared to when you'd been in immigration detention?
So when I went to Exeter, I just finished my sentence, and I came from Channing Wood. But prior to that, I spent about a couple of times, went to detention centre. Mm-hmm. So, but I didn't spend a lot of time in detention centre yet to know how if it's good or if it's bad.
So this was just after the two short periods at
Yeah.
Brookhouse. So moving on then to the third detention period, another 3-week period, and you cover this from paragraph 69 of your statement, which is page 14. So in due course, you were moved back to Brookhouse because removal was again planned imminently. Your initial healthcare assessment here shows that you arrived on an open ACDT, and you were on medication, which it says the Vern did not send with you. So you'd arrived without having the medication sent with you, and the assessment records no thought of deliberate self-harm, no suicidal thoughts. Would that have been correct at that time?
I can't remember that exact thing.
Do you remember being asked about that during the assessment? Or
When I come from the Vaughan, I remember there's a red file came with me, mm-hmm. and at the time from the Vaughan I was on suicide watch, and that's all I know.
So it says in your statement you were surprised to read the note because you remember, as you say, you were being regularly observed by officers at the Verne for suicide risk, and they brought a red file with them. And was that sort of people coming into your room to check if you're okay at regular intervals while you were at the Verne?
Yes.
Or meetings with people? You discuss an incident on the 18th of October 2016, which is at paragraphs 74 to 78, page 20. So this is the day on which you were due to be removed, I think the next day. And your record shows that you were complaining of chest pain as well as hyperventilating. You recall losing consciousness, although the medical record states that you were lying on the floor but blinking, and you were moved to E-wing on this occasion. And you say at 76, which we have at the top of page 20, an officer used racially abusive language to you and said that you were faking it.
Yes.
Were you on E-wing at this point, or was it before you'd been moved?
I was not on E-wing. I was taken to E-wing after I passed out. The reason why I think I come around is the officer tried to open the door, but I passed out behind the door. So when he opened the door, I think the door catch my head, and maybe that's why I come around. But I can't tell you the reason why I come around.
And was that the same officer who used the abusive language to you?
One of them, yes.
And you recall that was Graham Purnell?
Yes.
Did you know that was his name at the time, or did you later learn that was his name?
No, when I saw his picture, I remember his face.
And that was after you've been released?
Yes.
More recently. And you set out what he said at 76. Did other people hear him say that?
I'm not sure.
Did you make a complaint about this at any point?
I don't remember if I did make a complaint.
So you went to hospital after these events quite shortly afterwards on the 20th of October 2016. I think you had an ECG at Brookhouse and they said that was abnormal, and so they sent you to hospital. And you were then told that you'd return to prison. And we've been referred to your medical notes from this time, which are dated the 24th of October 2016, and they're cited accurately in your statement at 85 at the top of page 22. They say that you were very flat and tearful, that you'd been told you were returning to prison despite having finished your sentence, and you say, "I will kill myself before I go." Does that note reflect how you were feeling at the time?
Yes.
A custody officer was informed, and your observations were increased to be more frequent, I think, after you had this discussion, according to your notes. You were then eventually moved by force from Brookhouse, initially with a plan to go to HMP Exeter, but then eventually you ended up in the Verne. This was on the 7th of November 2016. You say you were initially advised you could tell the escorts you won't go because you're waiting for a legal update, but in fact you went down to speak with them, and in your words they grabbed you, you say one under the neck, and handcuffed you first behind your back and then with your arms tied in front of you. You think these people, you recognise them from a previous movement, you say in your statement. Do you mean by that they were escort agents who you'd seen before? We have your account of this in your statement at 88 to 98. And to write part of this statement, you had your complaint, which you'd made the following day, I think, that reminded you of your events, of the events.
Yes.
Is it fair to say, in summary of this event, that it caused you both physical pain and psychological distress?
Yes. Can I elaborate on that,
yes, please do.
So, this is the reason why I know that the medical people weren't doing their job. Because when I left Exeter said that I was not in condition to be there. And because of that, they put me to the Vaughan. So for them to send me back to Exeter, where there's paperwork already stated that I'm not suitable to be there, that was surprising. Another thing was surprising is I said, during my sentence or in the detention center, I know to keep rules and regulation. I don't break it because I know that if you break it, you can't win. So I stick to paperwork, stick to rules. I said, why am I going back to the detention center? Can somebody ask? So I went to the office and I said, can somebody tell me why? I was also on the wing, and they didn't put me back to the general population. And I'm thinking, wow, I've been in the general population. Well, all of a sudden, they didn't put me back there. Then one of the head sheds said I was not suitable. That was confusing because I was in there before. I was not suitable to go there. So when they said to me, going back to prison, I'm explaining to them, I have received something from the prison say, I can't go back there. Nobody interested. So I refused to go the first day, and then I write a letter to my caseworker. I understand that there's an assessment done, but nobody talked to me. How did the assessment done? And why nobody tell me about this assessment, and why am I going back to prison? And this is the reason why I don't think I should go back there. I write that complaint, but I didn't hear anything. So one day I'm up in church. One of the chief officers, they came to me, and they said, they came back for you to go to prison. I said, I already have this discussion with my caseworker and with other people, but he said, it's okay. Just go downstairs and let them know, and you just come straight back to church. And he take me to a room where when you get in bail and you're going out to the detention center, he take me to that room. So it's not like in the general public. And as I come through that door, they grabbed me. One grabbed my arm, one grabbed my other arm. And I said to them, I'm not here to create any harm, but one thing I'm not going to do, I'm not going to volunteer to go back to prison. So if you're going to take me back to prison, I'm not going to fight you, but you have to physically lift me up and take me back. And I remember, while I was there, somebody grabbed my throat from behind. And I'm trying to stiffen up because I didn't want to wrestle back because there was a lady. And I know if I wrestle back and I end up on hurting one of them, they would have used that against me. So I'm stiffening up. And after one moment, I tell myself, well, I have some training. And if I try to fight back or anything like that, I might get myself into trouble. So I kind of submit. But when I do submit, the guy hooked me and threw me down on the ground by my back and rolled me on my face. He take his knee and press it in my throat. And the other guy put his knee on my shoulder and bring my hand back and put me into a scorpion headlock. And I'm telling the person who is on my neck that I can't breathe, but he seems to be interested. At that moment, my mind just gone out of the room. And it's just like my mind gone into a war zone where I'm thinking that I'm getting kidnapped. And I'm telling myself that I prefer to die than they take me. And I remember I started to headbutt the wall. I just wanted to knock out myself to get out of that situation. And they managed to get this straight jacket on me. And they tie the straight jacket across my arm like that, and they put a Velcro thing around my legs. They lift me up and they took me into this van. And my mind shut off. So they were asking me questions. It's like I'm hearing echoing. I'm not hearing exactly what they're saying because my mind was not there. I'm just thinking to just die. When I reached to Bristol, they said to me, you want to use the toilet, but I'm not answering. They take the Velcro off my feet. And one of the hardest things is that they didn't take me to the back of the police station. They take me by the front desk where, civilian and everybody was there. They take me there in the straitjacket, put me there, stand up while they're talking, and they take me back into the van. And going to Exeter prison, they refused to take me there. And that's how I went back to the van.
Just staying with that point you mentioned about banging your head, there's a F213 form, which, as we know, is an injury to detainee form that's completed after a use of force. And it states, called to departures after being informed that D643 had attempted to hit his head against a wall in departures. Seen in the external escort van, small mark on front of head. When asked if I could inspect, he refused to cooperate, unable to assess further due to lack of compliance. Do you remember being asked about your head and whether it could be examined?
As I said, my mind was not in the room at this point. But one of the things that I find strange is that they know that I had PTSD. And for me, in my experience of detaining people, when I was in Iraq and we lock up any insurgent, and if we cannot assess to tell that person have a medical problem or not, because that's not our profession. But what we do is if the person appeared to not be himself, we'll call an expert in that field to say, can you look at this person? And then after that, we'll get an instruction from the person in that field to say, this is how you need to deal with that person. Now, I came to the detention center with a medical condition, PTSD. And in PTSD, sometimes, in certain situations, you might behave somehow. You might not know what the situation was. But they didn't even call, in that hostile situation, they didn't even call like a medical expert to say, this person might react like this or that person might react like that. So when them saying that I was not complying, my head wasn't in the room. My head was, I'm getting kidnapped here.
Just to note for the record, there's an injury and healthcare assessment which we do have on arrival, I think at the VERN, which was at tab 14. I won't show it on the screen, but I'll just give the reference. It's DL000216 that notes the head injury. So as you say, you were then taken to the VERN where you wrote your complaint about these events, which you set out in the statement. And you stayed in the VERN for about a month. During this time, you did have a Rule 35 1 assessment. Again, I'm not going to ask for this to be put on the screen, but for the Chair's note, it's at tab 15, and the reference is DL000219. This was on the 9th of December 2016, and you discuss it in your statement from paragraph 100 onwards, so from the bottom of page 25. Do you, if you remember, recall how you raised the issue of a Rule 35 at this point? Do you know if you suggested that you have an assessment or whether the VERN suggested it to you?
I just totally, I remember I went to a lady doctor, who was so nice. And I explained how I was feeling. And this is when I get a Rule 35. I didn't ask for one, I just tell her how I was feeling.
This is Dr. Jane Fowler, I think.
Yes.
And she read a report from Dr. Wright, who was someone you'd been dealing
Yes.
with regard to these symptoms. And also she made the Rule 35-1 report. Now, that report says that an alarm at the VERN was particularly triggering because it had the same sound as an alarm that reminded you of a combat situation. The Rule 35 says that release would affect your health because it would allow you to avoid the triggering sound, particularly, and also to access charitable support for veterans. Obviously, you were not released from the VERN because you were, in fact, transferred to Brookhouse. The Home Office response to the Rule 35 was to accept that you were an adult at risk, but to note that you were due to be moved to another immigration detention centre without the same alarm. And it also noted that your vulnerability was balanced against negative immigration factors, the imminence of your removal, and the likelihood of compliance were you to be removed. So you moved to Brookhouse, so away from the alarm in the VERN. Did that help with the triggering of those particular symptoms?
Yes.
And as I noted there, you were accepted as an adult at risk, and at the time your records show you were described as level 1, which was the case when you moved back to Brookhouse. So turning now to the fourth and the longest period of detention at Brookhouse, which started on the 21st of December 2016 and carried on until the 8th of May 2018. And in your statement, you begin to discuss this at page 30. So we've already discussed this, so I won't go over it again, but just for the note, at 114, you say that you asked to not share a cell with men from certain countries where you'd served. But in fact, I think it's during this longer period of detention was when you did. You had a healthcare assessment on arrival, which you summarise at 115. It mentions a history of mental illness, but it says in their words, prisoner has not tried to harm themselves in prison or outside prison, and it doesn't mention PTSD. This is only 12 days after you had your Rule 35 and discussed PTSD with the doctor in the VERN. Do you recall how long this assessment lasted? Was it similar to the other assessments you'd had on arriving at Brookhouse?
All the assessment that I have at Brookhouse is identical. You go there and they tick a box, they ask you some questions, tick a box. I don't recall that I get an assessment where they were asking me about that particular mental health.
But slight chest pain is noted, and evidently this got worse, which we can see from your records and your statement. So I understand, again, your move to Brookhouse because your removal was imminently planned, And the day after your arrival at Brookhouse, the 22nd of December 2016, you ended up attending A&E with chest pain. This is discussed in your statement from 116. So you were escorted there and you were handcuffed the whole time.
Yes.
And I understand you found this particularly distressing.
Yes.
You had some investigations while you were there, as well as some treatment, I think, for the chest pain. So you had, there was a consideration you might have a pulmonary embolus, I think. Do you want to have a
No,
quick
I'm
break?
okay.
Okay. So we see from your notes that there was a sort of question mark pulmonary embolus, and you had to have a Clexane injection, I think, so an injection to assist with the chest pain. A follow-up scan was needed. You needed a CT pulmonary angiogram, which is how they check for blood clots on the lungs. You couldn't have that on that day. And you say you now understand that the doctor who saw you put her phone number on a form requesting that you reattend, I think the following day or as soon as possible for that CT scan that you needed. Did you know at the time that she'd put her phone number on that form?
Can I elaborate on that, please?
Yes, please do, yeah.
So, when I get the ticket, I don't know if it's before, but I had some serious chest pain, and the ambulance came for me, and I remember going down to the hospital. We were in emergency, and I said to the guy, that can I use the toilet? He put this handcuff around my wrist, and he gave me like a chain, like a dog, like a leash, and sent me to the toilet while I'm on that chain. And people was looking, and I find that really, I couldn't believe that you would get treatment like this. Anyway, sorry. When I finished see the doctor and I had that injection, and every time you go to the hospital, the doctor would write up whatever paper, but they don't give it to you. They take it back straight to the center.
Yeah.
So I've never seen none of the doctor paperwork, not even the number. And then I received a monthly report stating that I was trying to escape. And I find that particularly hard because all the time I'm trying to keep the rules and regulation. And for somebody to say that I'm trying to escape, I can accept that. So now I'm trying to make a complaint. Who do I go to? Go to the office, the wing office, couldn't get no answer. Or write my caseworker, couldn't get no answer. And then I asked if I could ask question, and they tell me that I think it was a lady who was the head. I'm not sure. And then I think she write me a note, said, this is the situation. The
Sorry,
doctor.
I hate to interrupt you. Can I just stop you there and work through the healthcare note? Because it's quite a confusing situation. It maybe makes more sense if we look at the quote that you give at 119. So we see that you were sent home with this form to attend the next day for a CT scan.
Yeah.
And the note that you quote at 119 says, and this is made by someone in healthcare at Brookhouse. I know you didn't see this at the time, but you've seen it now. I contacted the number given after the conversation had finished. There was no answer, and the call went to a BT answer machine. And then the healthcare worker contacted the acute medical unit, spoke with somebody, a ward clerk, who said that the number given was not theirs and they didn't know of the name of the doctor. So the healthcare worker left a note in the observation book, submitted an SIR, so a serious incident report, and informed Oscar 1. Then they got a phone call from a female stating her name was the doctor, and she was contacting us to bring you to the hospital for your CT scan. She gave her contact number, which is redacted. I informed her it was highly unusual for a doctor to be making such a request. She responded by saying she preferred to do it herself to avoid the queue. So that's the situation with them seeing the number, ringing it up, and then getting the phone call. And you did, in fact, have a scan the following day, didn't you?
Yeah.
As discussed, and you attended hospital for that. So sorry to cut through you there. You then
That's
made
okay.
a complaint about the way this was dealt with. And I think you mentioned it was to a lady. You recall now that it was Michelle Brown, I understand, from your statement. And you summarise that her response was, which you set out at 121, healthcare had reached the conclusion this had been a deliberate attempt by me to try and attend the hospital the following day and escape with help from that individual.
Yeah.
Is that what you
Yes.
recall her saying to you about that? Did you reply to that explanation that Michelle Brown or whoever it was who dealt with the complaint gave you?
I tried to reply to it, but they didn't allow me because she said I already give that explanation. So there was no way that I could have fight it to explain to them that I wasn't trying and I did not know the doctor. Because as far as I know, it was already on file. It was already in my monthly report. And there's no way that I could have changed that situation.
And then you refer at 122 to a note made in April 2017 at a security meeting, which is D643, believed an escape plot with outside help, ex-military. And is there anything else that this could be referring to in relation to an escape plot?
Ex-military?
Ex-military, yes.
So this is the first time I'm hearing that one, because I thought the only escape was with the doctor. So there was another escape with ex-military?
Sorry, it's a full stop after the saying that there was an escape plot, and then it just notes that you're ex-military. It doesn't suggest that the escape plot was ex-military. You can see it in your statement at 122.
So there's two things. One, I've been to prison for the last 4 years, straight from prison to detention center. So I get a phone, and with that phone, I have no access to nobody's number. All I've seen when I was in detention was a parcel from Gatwick, a charity.
Yes,
And one lady-
Detainee welfare group.
Yeah, one lady came to see me from the time I was there, which was very helpful. And this is the only person that I know. So I did not know anybody outside.
So as far as you know, the only thing that this can be referring to is the previously mentioned
Yep.
potential escape suspicion that was noted in your healthcare notes. Before we go on then to some specific issues around healthcare within Brookhouse during this time, you made a general number of comments about life in the centre. These are from page 39 of the statement onwards, paragraph 142. So the first thing that you mentioned, page 39, and there's a couple of sort of subheadings of general points you wanted to note about life in the centre. Do you have 39? So there's a subheading racial abuse, and you say that you heard an officer refer to some detainees as the blacks. For example, I remember an officer saying, "Why don't these blacks go back to their country?" Was this something you heard more than once or just on one occasion?
From when I passed out, and then one time I was in the black and I heard this.
And as set out above, you were referred to by the N-word, and you heard officers use this term to refer to other black detainees.
Yes,
Are they talking amongst themselves?
amongst themselves, but they didn't let them know. Like, they didn't call the detainees, they were just talking among themselves.
On the occasion where you said it was used in reference to you, was that directly to you or about you to somebody else that we talked about with in your cell?
He was talking it. I don't think he was saying it to me. He was just making a statement.
And you say that you've been shown some photos of the officers, and you can identify that some of the officers who you recall making racist comments included Graham Pennell, Joseph Marshall, and Luke Instone Brewer. And Graham Pennell is the one who used the N-word about you.
Yes.
You also mentioned stereotyping of people from different nationalities being treated differently.
Yeah. If you don't have a prison sentence or you don't come from prison, you get treated differently than the person that comes from prison. So it was not equal.
Treated differently how?
They would get the job you want, and if you do get a job, it would be something like go do stitching in the library. They would use that you're dangerous or something like this to not make you participate in things.
You also say that Jamaican detainees were particularly targeted. Do you remember Jamaican detainees being treated differently to anybody else in particular?
Yes.
So did you know of Jamaican detainees who were treated,
So
without saying their names, of course?
yeah. So Jamaican are very, when it comes to going home, they're very reluctant not to. So when the officers like come for them, they will be more equipped and be more ready to maybe use physical force.
And you mentioned at 143 onwards, abuse relating to mental health and criminal convictions. So we've already discussed that people generally from prison would be treated differently, as far as you recall. But you also say that officers would joke and tease about criminal convictions. So again, without giving any name or specific details about convictions, do you mean that officers would refer to information that they knew about somebody's conviction in front of them, or about them?
They wouldn't in front of them, but what I find very strange is that some of the officers had close relationships, like friend relationship with other detainees. And they would say, oh, that person over there been to prison for this or been to prison for that, which I find is personal and unprofessional. And they would joke among themselves as well.
So when you say they have close relationships, do you mean with each other and you'd hear them, officers with officers and you'd hear them talking?
Some officers have close relationship with some detainees.
I see. So they'd know about their criminal conviction.
Yeah, so I see officers talking to detainee about other people.
I see. And you also mention officers, as you say, mocking and laughing at detainees who were mentally unwell, particularly when they made noises or...
Yeah.
Was this particularly on E-Wing or generally?
Most of the time I've seen on E-Wing. I also see like they're mocking when you go to church, and I hear officers saying, okay, they're singing and praising God. That wouldn't save them from getting deported.
Would this happen in front of... I think you mentioned that people wearing different shirts being, different coloured shirts being different levels of seniority within the officers. Do you know what level of seniority you'd hear these sorts of comments from?
Just the normal, not the senior. Since I've been there, I've never seen an officer senior behave in that type of way, because to me, in my opinion, the seniors, they're always busy. The only thing I could say about the seniors, you don't get the help when you go to make a complaint.
Do you know, when you refer to seniors, are you talking about DCMs? Or
I
do you remember what colour top they wear, if that's easier?
They wear white shirt.
White shirt.
And they wear a pretty colour tie.
As opposed to the kind of polo shirt that
Yeah.
others would wear. And then you mentioned witnessing physical violence at 144. And you say that when officers were violent, they would do it after lockdown so that other detainees could not see.
Yes.
So if it was after lockdown, how did you know that this happened?
How do I know it happened? Because it happened to me.
Did you see it happen to anybody else?
It happened to the person next door.
And did you ever report... obviously, you reported and made complaints about things that happened to you. Did you ever report things that happened to other people?
Only bullying from other detainees.
To you?
No.
Sorry, bullying of you by other detainees?
No, bullying to other detainees. Like I said, well, you're here, look at that. Why don't you do something about it?
Yes.
Yeah.
And you also say that sometimes other detainees would mock you, for example, for being very tidy and
Yes,
due to your background.
they call me gay and all that, but it didn't really bother me that they would call me that.
You talk about intimidation tactics at 145, and you say that things like daily essentials like toilet roll were sometimes arbitrarily refused.
Yes, sometimes you go to the office for toilet rolls and they'll say, "Well, I just give you one." They would say, "I give you one. What? Do you want to use all of it?" So information like that. But I'm telling you this. These tactics that they use is with the mailing system. So when I go to the van, when you receive mail, they put your name on the board. So whether or not it is a ticket or a visit, at least you see your name on the board, so you prepare for that. And one of the things I heard from mostly all the detainees that I've talked to and the experience I felt, what did your G4S officer do? And they know that it's very intimidating and very frightening, because I've seen people cry. They would get a letter from maybe a caseworker or visitors, and what they do, they put the letter under your door at 2 o'clock in the morning. So when you're sleeping and you wake up, you saw this letter under your door, and you're frightened because you don't know what is there, and then know that it works. And how do I know? It is intimidating, and it's a scare tactics, because I've been to the different detention center. I haven't seen that, but I feel the effect of it, and I heard hundreds of detainees talk about how scary it is. It is really frightening, because sometimes it can be a visit, and sometimes it could be a ticket, but you don't know. But to wake up to something, to me, like it's an ambush. And you see the letter there, and I've seen big men crying. Can you open it? Is it yours? Is it mine? I don't know. I'm scared. And I think that is really wrong.
And you also mentioned in a similar vein that you feel that officers deliberately rotated people around from the room that they were sort of settled in into a different room.
Yes.
Why do you think that was done sort of deliberately rather than just for operational reasons?
It's my opinion, but this doesn't have to be correct. But I think sometimes, one, is because they think that people might be selling spies. Two, is because they think that this person might be a little bit more, not want to cooperate, and they can't have that in front of the other detainee.
Can I just ask finally about your, just in terms of general points, about the phone and internet connection and also fax connection that you experienced when you were at Brookhouse? Were you able to reliably access the internet when you needed to?
So this, again, is my opinion, and what I hear from other detainees. I did ECM training anti-narration in the Army as well as a signaler for my platoon. And one of the things that I've noticed is that every time there's a flight, the phone that you get from when you arrive in the center, it cut off, and the internet cut off, and majority of all the fax would stop work and lead you to one fax. And that fax would break down because everybody from each unit want permission to go and use that fax. And I thought it was, okay, this is one time, but it's not one time. It's every single time. And then So when I'm in there, one guy came to me and he said, do you want to buy a phone? So I said, okay, yeah. And so he sold me this smartphone. So I'm using this smartphone to go on Facebook and talk to my daughter. So happy that I had it. But one of the things that I noticed that when all the phone is not working, mine was working. And I find it was very strange. But all of the detainee were complaining all the time about the situation. Because every time a flight, everybody get nervous and want to make contact. So in my opinion, I believe that every time a flight is going, they cut off the internet and the phone.
Did you or did any of the people who are affected by that make complaints about it or raise it and say, why is this happening?
All the time.
We're going to ask a few questions about healthcare and the support you had around PTSD, and then we'll take a short break at about 11:15. So just a couple of questions before we have a break, if that suits. So if we turn to page 33 of your statement, and from 124, paragraph 124 onwards, and you're talking now about right at the end of 2016, so right at the end of December 2016, you described some support you did have with PTSD symptoms while you were in Brookhouse, and that was from PTSD Resolution. I think you arranged this yourself, didn't
Yes.
you? Where would you have those sessions?
In the visits. No, I think they had a little room. They give me a little room, sorry.
For the first month or so that you were back, so up to about this point, you hadn't gone to Brookhouse Healthcare Department for assistance, for mental health assistance. Why was that?
I refused to, after a series of going there and I'm not getting listened to, and people started to doubt me. And after I had that experience from Devon, knowing how I get treated there, and coming to Brookhouse and people doubting me and literally don't want to listen to me, it was very hard for me. It's like going in there to negotiate and the other side is not having it. And I decided, especially when I went to this doctor, I went to this health nurse and I said, this is my situation today. I remember they give me a form to fill out to say how I feel every day.
Stress diary,
Yeah.
they referred to.
So I'm filling out, I'm using this form. And I went to her and I said, this is how I felt today. And she said, well, here. And this is a bit biased, but I have to speak the truth. The reason I went to her, she's a Jamaican lady. And I felt, okay, she's black, I'm black. It might be easier to communicate with her as we are from the Caribbean. So I go and I said, this is how I feel. She said, well, there's nothing that I can do. That's her word. So I went to the doctor and I explained to the doctor, and the doctor said, go to the health nurse. And I said, well, I've been there. And she said, there's nothing she can do. And then he called her and he said, you just tell him that he came to you and you just tell him there's nothing you can do. And she said, he's lying. And I said, and I noticed that he believed her, and I said, I'm not going back. And that's it.
So you did attend healthcare on the 11th of January 2017. Do you know if that's the occasion you're talking about? You set out in your statement at 127. He'd been feeling lonely since Christmas, which made him feel distressed, and previously been told he should speak to someone when this happens. Is that the time that you went to see the Jamaican nurse?
I'm not sure.
Well, not to worry. It says that you wanted to be referred to Combat Stress, which is a veterans charity, I understand. But it's recorded, as this was an immigration removal centre, we would be unable to refer him. However, I suggested he could speak to the GP here. And then you say that you did email Combat Stress yourself, but they couldn't help you because of your immigration status. You mentioned then engaging with the emotional health group, but this didn't help. And you say at 128 that you began to feel worse, so suffering from depression, spending all day in your room alone, and also feeling suicidal. So you had a Rule 35 assessment at the end of January 2017, which is set out in your statement at 129 to 130. This is by Dr. Puvanendran, the GP that you saw in healthcare at Brookhouse. And you set this out in your statement. Chair, you have this at tab 16, and I wonder if we could see that on the screen. It's DL 0000220. Yes, I have that on my screen now, thank you. This is a Rule 35(1) report, which means it pertains to a detainee whose health is likely to be injuriously affected by continued detention or the conditions of detention, as it says there at the top. Can I ask for the bottom of page 1 to be shown, please? It states at the bottom there, the above-named detainee suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder. The cause of this disorder is the suffering he witnessed, and it goes on to say why. And if we go to the top of page 3, please. There's a question which is why is physical or mental health likely to be injuriously affected by continued detention? And it states there, continued detention will only make him lose his confidence. As it is, he talks to no one thinking they will not understand. Constantly reminded of the traumatic scenes he witnessed in Iraq makes him anxious, agitated and depressed. Ongoing detention would only perpetuate those problems. And if we go to the bottom of that same page, it says whether there's been a detailed mental health assessment, and if so, carried out by whom. And it says at the bottom of that, in response, I will be referring to a psychiatrist who attends Brookhouse weekly. And then if we go to page 4, which is the Section 5 assessment, as to the impact of detention. In relation to the question, what impact is detention having, or the conditions of detention having or likely to have on the detainee's health and why, it says it will make him depressed and anxious. Question 2, whether remedial action can be taken to minimise the risk to the detainee's health while in detention. It says, I would think that the best cure would be to take him out of this environment by releasing him so that he can return to his family. And then it says that he would also need to have medication and to have counselling. And then at 3, if the risks are not yet serious, are they assessed as likely to become so in a particular time frame? And it says the risk to the detainee's health is already very serious. You can take that down now, thank you. Do you remember this assessment with Dr. Puvanendran?
No.
And the response from the Home Office came 11 days later, and the decision was not to release you, and this is at 135 in your statement. The Home Office accept that the GP confirmed the diagnosis of PTSD and that it provides an opinion that detention is having a negative impact on you, is likely to be injurious to your health, accepts that you're an adult at risk. It says that you pose significant public protection concern and notes the length of your sentence, states that your condition is being controlled by medication, you've been referred to a psychiatrist, and you previously found support from a psychologist very helpful, and you're being supported by the mental health team in Brookhouse. So I believe it's correct, but correct me if I'm wrong, you were on medication at the time.
Yes.
Do you feel it was controlling your condition appropriately?
No, because I was still in that environment. So whether or not I take the medication, which I still was, in that environment, and it wasn't making a difference.
And it says that you had also been referred to a psychiatrist in this response. I think that must be because in the Rule 35 assessment, she says, I've referred you to a psychiatrist, or I will refer you to a psychiatrist. Was that in fact done? Were you referred to a psychiatrist while at Brookhouse?
No.
By Brookhouse?
The only psychiatrist that I've seen is people that I email myself.
And it says you were being supported by the mental health team in Brookhouse. So you did have access, obviously, to a mental health nurse at Brookhouse.
I think, in my opinion, when I went to see them all the time, but this is the first time they see somebody who have been to combat. And so I go there every day, but they would tell me the same thing all the time. So, in my opinion, and I don't think I have the right to say this, but I don't think they didn't know how to deal with my situation.
And as you go on to say at 137 overleaf, the healthcare team never did refer me to a psychiatrist. You say, I was referred to Dr. Davies at PTSD Resolutions, but that was by your solicitors.
Yes.
And you did start to meet with him and have
Yes.
sessions at Brookhouse. I think it's about 11:15 now, so I'm going to suggest we have a short break, maybe for 15 minutes, and return at 11:30.
Thank you. We'll return at 11:30. Thank you very much, sir.
All right.
Moore. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We continue with the evidence of D643. So we've been over the specific Rule 35 assessment just now, and I just wanted to ask a couple of other interactions with healthcare. I won't take you to each one of them. You have set them out in your witness statement very helpfully. There were 2 instances in April where loud noises caused panic attacks, and you've already mentioned that happening before. You told nurses and healthcare assistants that you were deteriorating. These are described at 153 to 156 of your statement, and on one of those occasions that you were suicidal. And I think this led to you being seen by Dr. Uzarali on the 26th of April 2017 for having been referred to him for a Rule 35 report. Can we have on the screen, please, DL 0000217, and Chair, you should have that at tab 17. So if we look at the top of the document, so the first kind of large entry, yes, perfect, for a bit of context to start with. So there's an entry there. Can you see that on your screen? Yeah. And there's an entry there on the 24th of April 2017. History, stress management, emotional health group entry. And it says, attended group reported experiencing flashbacks in response to sudden loud noises and responding to these by dropping to the floor. He says that he feels embarrassed afterwards. He expressed frustration at the length of his stay, noting that all the people that he was originally in with have moved on and that he's still here. Was, however, supportive of a new group member. So that's you attending the emotional support group that you've mentioned there, and the plan at the bottom is to continue to attend the group. And it looks here that the group is run by an occupational therapist. The next day, which is the next kind of large entry on that document, you seek out a nurse because of an incident on the wing which caused you concern for your health. This is the entry about 2/3 down. And just to read the first bit, notes your history of PTSD, symptoms worsening, incident on wing yesterday, out of character behaviour. Rule 35 request. Examination states incident on wing yesterday where detainee was banging on the floor with item loudly. Found himself on floor ducking for cover. After a while, he found himself attacking the detainee, states very out of character for him, and he's very concerned his medications and symptoms are deteriorating, feeling out of control. And at the bottom, there's a bit of the history, and then at the bottom there, pre-Rule 35 appointment booked. And then we see that you did attend a Rule 35 appointment, and this is the last entry on the page. So that's just to give the background of how you got there. And this is the entry by Dr. Uzarali. You see the start of it at the bottom of this page. History says that he feels his mental health is deteriorating. He mentions that there are a few occasions where he feels his PTSD has returned, and there has been a wave of, if we go to the next page at the top, anxiety. He feels that in the last 2 weeks there's been a change in his behaviour. On examination, he presents composed and alert with no hypervigilance, but appears in low mood. He maintains good eye contact. And then the plan there. I have advised that in this instance, I feel it more appropriate that he contacts the mental health teams and they can consider referral to psychiatrists if appropriate and monitor his progress. I do not feel that R35 is appropriate at this time, as I have not observed a deterioration and he does not appear acutely unwell. I have spoken to the mental health team and they have informed me that with regards to treatment, there are options for him. I also acknowledge that he feels this environment has more triggers for his PTSD that he cannot avoid. He politely excuses himself from the room, disappointment with my suggestion, which I had to repeat a number of times. Do you remember that meeting with Dr. Uzarali?
I think that was the occasion with the mental nurse.
So when there was the back and forth with the Jamaican nurse you referred to. Were you seeing Dr. Uzarali regularly at this time?
He wasn't a really nice person to go to. Every time you go to visit him, you make up your mind to have an argument. Because when you go to him, one of the favorite things that he has asked you, did you have a ticket? And this seems to be a culture going around. When you complain for anything, they usually ask, do you have a ticket? And for me, I didn't like that. If I'm going to ask for help, let's say I ask for a glass of water, what having a ticket have to do with asking for a glass of water? So when I go to the doctor, he'll ask, do you have a ticket? And then, depends on what you said, he would just uninterested.
Can you just help me with that? What do you mean by have a ticket?
So, when you make complaint to various departments in the detention center, First of all, there's a culture in there that everything you do, every complaint you make is because you're avoiding to get deported. So when you go to make a complaint, they'll ask you, do you have a ticket? And if it's yes, they will come up with the conclusion that you're using that, your scenario to get out of a flight.
Please correct me if I've got the wrong end of the stick. By a ticket, you mean like a plane ticket,
Yes,
removal
like,
directions.
yeah.
Okay, and it's not in the note here, but it says in your statement that you tried to show Dr. Uzerali a report from Dr. Wright.
Yes.
What did you hope that he would do with that report?
So I said, okay, I've been to various to ask for help. So when I get the assessment from Dr. Wright, I went to him and I said, can you add this to my my medical report so that if any persons in the future look at my medical report, this would be part of it. And that could give them a better understanding of, how to go about with me. And he refused.
And he says in this note, I have not observed a deterioration. Do you agree that you hadn't had a particular deterioration at this point?
So, because I'm from a military background, I have a culture of wake up in the morning and shave and dress neat. So sometimes people see me do that and they think that I'm okay. But that's just a routine that I have from the military. And I don't think people could just judge you by looking at you and say that you're up here okay.
And as you note at 164, following this, you were reassessed as an adult at risk level 2, which was on the 5th of May 2017 during a detention review, but obviously there wasn't a Rule 35 for the reasons that Dr. Uzerali puts on the note. An entry in your healthcare notes, which you quote at 166, 167, so page 46 of your report, says that in the following weeks you continued to experience severe PTSD symptoms. And there's an entry by Nurse Dalla Dowd, the mental health nurse, that says that you were having flashbacks similar to hearing sounds like gunshots, and sometimes you get suicidal thoughts. And you tell us a bit later in your statement, at page 55, 192, that there were other times, perhaps not as explicit as that, but you made your condition very clear. You might not have used the term suicidal, but you made it clear to the healthcare team that you were in distress and that you felt that your condition was worsening. And one of the things that you were encouraged to do, which I think you've already mentioned to us, was to keep a stress diary, so to keep a note of how you're feeling. Were you encouraged to do that by the emotional health group or by a nurse? Or
the mental nurse.
And we have a couple of entries from there, which you have set out. You can take the what's on the screen down now, thank you. There's entries at paragraph 192, which is page 55, and they're all from May 2017. One on the 8th of May says, every day, this is your own writing from your diary at the time, flashbacks, keep myself to myself, struggling mentally, crying and isolate myself and don't talk to anyone. 11th of May, flashbacks while sleeping, grief-stricken, depressed, anxious and guilty, also crying. And then 23rd of May 2017, struggling with my situation, struggling on the wing to be around people from Iraq and Afghan, bringing back memories from Iraq. Sorry. So that they're your entries from May about how you were feeling. Would other people see this diary? Was the purpose of it to show others, or just to keep it
No.
for yourself?
I just wanted, because I wanted help, it's the best that when I go for somebody to help, they have an idea of what's going on. And that was the purpose of me doing that.
So you just keep it for yourself, and it was you've been recommended to do that as part of...
And to assess anybody who in the future who is going to see me and extend the help to me.
And you did indeed have some assessments quite shortly after this. So you had a number of specialist assessments. We've been provided with those, and you referred to them in your statement. I'll summarise and ask a couple of questions about those, but we do have the detail in your statement. So first, there was a report by Dr. Ansari, a psychologist who met you on the 9th of June 2017 at Brookhouse. And the purpose of that was to explore your risk and progress following a rehabilitation course that you'd undertaken in prison. Dr. Ansari noted that you'd told them about your symptoms and how they were exacerbated by living in Brookhouse. The main purpose of this was to consider reoffending risk. and Dr. Ansari's conclusion was that you could be safely managed in the community. Then you received a report in June 2017 from Dr. Owen Davies, who'd been providing the therapy to you since March 2017. I will ask for this to be shown on the screen, please. It's HOM 032372. And Chair, you have this at tab 6. His report notes that the first 2 sessions were in the visits hall, which I think you alluded to, and then afterwards were in a private room with you, although there was still noise outside and on one occasion interruption from staff, but you did have a private room eventually for most of the sessions. Can we go to the bottom of page 3, please? This is a section entitled Conclusions. Thank you. This says D643 has experienced traumatic events during his army service which have caused severe mental distress. It goes on to say he's been diagnosed with PTSD, but is the view of this report that his PTSD is not accessible to effective treatment whilst he is in his current situation or his present mental state. And at the top of page 4, it may be that treatment carried out in the present course of therapy may have longer-term positive effects, and D643 himself felt that techniques for relaxation learned would be of benefit. However, for any treatment to be successful, D643 needs to be carried out in an environment where he feels secure about his future, where there is less to remind him of previous events, and where his emotional needs, particularly in terms of his closeness to others, particularly his daughter, may be met more effectively. Do you agree with that sort of summary? And did you share this report with Brookhouse staff? I know you did with the Home Office eventually, but did you give it to healthcare, do you recall?
I'm not sure if I give it to them, but I always want any report about my mental health go on my medical record, but I'm not sure if I did give it to the staff at Brookhouse.
Fine. And then there's finally a report from Professor Fox, a psychiatrist who you met on the 21st of June 2017 at Brookhouse. I'll ask for this to be shown as well. It's HOM 023459. And Chair, you have this at tab 7. So I understand this was commissioned by your solicitors to, amongst other things, assist with litigation around your immigration status generally, as well as release from detention. If we just wait a moment for that to come up. Thank you. This is, can we have page 23 of that document on the screen, please? This is the page in which the findings are summarised. Chair, for now I just would probably intend to adduce only this page, so just page 23 of this document, as well as the front page to give context. At the top, 4.1, it says that you are a former infantryman involved in significant combat experience on multiple operational tours in the British Army. It goes on to say that you developed PTSD. And then from 4.2 to 4.3, the conclusion of Professor Fox's opinion. In my opinion, D643 is suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, gives the classification. The severity of this, in my view, is severe due to the nature of his traumatic exposure in multiple episodes. Unfortunately, he is currently held in detention, which is aggravating his mental health difficulties as it puts him back into the traumatic situation because of the noises at night and the environment, but also because of the other inmates, many of whom come from Iraq, where he experienced his trauma. In addition, the environment is noisy, as I witnessed, and this further traumatises him as he is sensitive to noise. It is my view that the current detention centre is not conducive to him receiving adequate therapy, and it is likely that he will continue to deteriorate mentally. We can take that down now, thank you. And again, do you recall whether you provided this to anyone at Brookhouse, or can you not remember?
No, I don't recall that I provide that.
We know that you did provide it to the Home Office because there's a letter on the 23rd of July 2017 which you discuss at paragraph 180, so page 50 of your statement. You say in your statement that you had no response to this for 10 months, so not until after you'd been released from Brookhouse. You set out in your statement a number of entries from your detention records, which you've now seen, which record the decisions to maintain your detention. I understand you wouldn't have seen these at the time, but now you'll have seen them. You see that they refer at various points to the fact you could be removed within a reasonable period of time, as well as to the seriousness of a previous conviction, risk of harm to the public. And you note an example at 188 of your statement from 22nd of November 2017, which refers to your conviction and to a realistic prospect of removal, but not to your mental state or to the effect of detention on you. And in fact, the only factor in favour of your release at that point was recorded as an outstanding appeal. While you were in Brookhouse, did you in general know why you weren't being released, despite obviously asking to be?
I think because they said I was not suitable to go in the community, and they didn't have somewhere to put me.
So you were getting some updates by way of detention reviews about the decisions that had been made about your consideration of ongoing detention? Were people telling you, we thought about it and here's the conclusion?
Yes, but only when I get bail. When I get bail, they'll said you will release in a couple of days, and then I'll get the same letter that I get the last time when I get bail. I'm not suitable for going back in the community, and they can't find anywhere to put me.
Yes, we're just about to come on to bail actually, but just before we do, I wanted to briefly ask about IMB. So you mentioned this at page 52, which is the page we were just on. Some notes that were made about you by members of the IMB who appeared to have some concerns about your Rule 35 status. Did you know anything about the IMB, so the Independent Monitoring Board?
No.
Had you come across them during time at prison?
I don't even know what IMB is, sorry.
That's fine. From the notes you've referred to, it's not clear whether you were speaking with IMB or whether they'd just seen some information about you somewhere else. So as far as you remember, you didn't meet anyone from IMB. You did say that you had a visitor from the Gatwick Detainee Welfare Group.
Yeah, always. She was very helpful. I have to say that Gatwick Detainee is very useful for a detention centre, and I hope they continue to do that job. I also bid as well, because I just want to make a reference to bid, and then I'll make a reference to Gatwick Detainee.
So bid is bail for immigration
Yeah.
detention.
So because of lack of information from the staff that work at Brookhouse, and because bid appeared to be friendly, we were asked them not to help us, but necessary information, how to make a complaint, how to fill out a bail form, how to do this, because we won't get. So they were very helpful. The other organization, I wasn't getting any visit at all because nobody know where I was. And this lady, she come to visit me every single week. She had a dog, and it was so good to me. I was so looking forward because it's the only ease from the detention center I used to get. And we even a friend up to today. She don't come anymore, but I'm friend with the family, and that's how useful it was to me. So I'm gonna have to say thanks to the welfare and bid, because they really helped me out inside there.
How did you learn about the existence of BID, bail for immigration detainees?
So they came, I think, once a week. Mm-hmm. And by hearing about them from Detainee, mm-hmm. I went to visit them. And they are the one that helped me to get bail as well.
And how did you learn about Gatwick Detainee Welfare Group? Was it similar?
No, I think I saw this on a poster around the centre somewhere. Mm-hmm.
How long had you been there until you started being visited? Was it quite soon after you arrived?
No, it's a good while, maybe a year.
And would you meet with them in the visits hall?
Yes, one person.
Meet with the lady who you mentioned, yes. So turning then to bail, you mentioned this at page 55 onwards in your statement. On the 13th of December 2017, you were granted bail in principle by an immigration judge who had noted the length of your detention and your condition and your status as a vulnerable adult at risk. That was lapsed because no accommodation was provided for you. So I understand you get bail if certain things are met, and one of the things was that you had to have certain accommodation approved by probation services as suitable, and that didn't happen, so you didn't get the bail you'd been provisionally granted. This happened again on the 9th of February 2018, so again a judge granted conditional bail, but no accommodation could be identified, so it lapsed. And again on the 23rd of March 2018, conditional bail again, and we'll come back to that one. So before we come to the issue of each of those grants of provisional bail, you requested another Rule 35 report in January 2018, and what we have is your complaint which followed this. Can I have this on screen? It's DL0000221. Chair, it's behind your tab 20. And you've helped us with this because you referred to Dr. Chowdhury and Dr. Azhar Ali, and you now understand that it's Uzur Ali and Dr. Chowdhury, but they're the people, you'd only heard their names and not seen them written down, so that's your estimation of how to spell that. I'm just going to read the big paragraph there, and you can tell me if you've got anything to add to this, because this is your account from about a month after. On the second week of January 2018, I went to the health centre to see the medical staff to let them know that I felt low and stressed out as I was getting suicidal thoughts and would like to speak to someone for help. I took with me 3 of my psychiatrist reports as I wanted the staff to know more about my PTSD condition and what was affecting me in detention. They took me to see a Dr. Chowdhury. I tried to talk him about how I was feeling at the time and asking for help, but Dr. Chowdhury wasn't listening to me. Instead, he was asking me about my immigration case and telling me to report my problems to my caseworker, as he can't do anything about my problem. He took the reports from me with my consent. He scanned the reports and added them to my medical record. I felt that Dr. Chowdhury did not deal with my case correctly. Instead, he concentrated more on my immigration case, which was irrelevant at the time. Dr. Chowdhury told me he was going to report his concerns at a staff meeting about the length of my detention, and he would get back to me in a week. 1 month had passed, and he did not get back to me. However, when I went to see him, he refused to see me. He gave me no information at all. I felt Dr. Chowdhury had no interest in my medical condition and my complaints. He made me feel useless and unwanted. I left the medical centre more stressed out than when I went in. The fact that he did not listen to my complaint, it made me never want to go back to him again. So just pausing there, if we leave that on the screen. You mentioned giving him 3 reports. Is that the 3 that we've just been discussing? Yeah. And you state you waited a while to see if he was going to get back to you.
Yeah.
And he didn't, and you returned in February 2018. This is the bottom of page 1, please. In February 2018, I went to see Dr. Azhar Ali for a Rule 35 assessment, as my 2 previous Rule 35 assessments I had were over 1 year old. My circumstances have changed, and I had new independent evidence to support my claim. When I arrived in Dr. Ali's office, he asked me if I have been tortured, because this is the reason people usually do Rule 35. I tried to explain to him that I am an adult at risk, and my circumstances have changed from last time I had my 2 Rule 35s done. I also had these independent evidence with me, but Dr. Ali refused to listen to what I have to say and started to be very aggressive with me. By then I was very upset, stressed out and emotional. Dr. Ali, and then to turn over the page, refuses to take my evidence. Again, he concentrates on my immigration case instead of what I was saying to him. He refused to give me the assessment and asked me to leave his office because he did not have time to waste on me. He said he's not getting anywhere with me. It was as if I was in a difficult negotiation and the other party was making it extremely difficult for me. It made me come to a conclusion never to go back to the medical centre again, as it made me feel more worse coming out than going in. And your statement says that after this happened, you were very distressed and you went to complain to the wing manager, Steve Dix. Was he supportive of you on that occasion?
He just listened to me, but as I said, I don't think he believed what I was saying to him. But I'm not sure. I don't remember exactly if you went to see him or not. I don't know.
You say that he encouraged you, though, to write up a complaint.
Yeah,
I don't think this one. I think
Yeah.
that was on the day. So would that have been a form that you leave in a box, possibly? Yeah. And then you say Mr. Dix asked you to go to an informal meeting in due course with Dr. Uzur Ali. This is at paragraph 202 of your statement. So it's on page 59. You say, the next day, I do not recall the date in February exactly, he took me to have he being Steve Dix, took me to have an informal meeting with Dr. Uzur Ali. And my understanding is this meeting was off the record and was therefore not recorded in my medical records. Why do you think it was off the record?
I don't remember exactly, but I think they wanted to give me the Rule 35 if I dropped the complaint.
Do you remember anything else being said at the meeting?
I can't remember exactly.
you said in your statement, I felt threatened to drop the complaint and I had to bargain with a medical professional in order to have my medical records updated and to receive adequate medical care. I agreed to drop the complaint at the time because I felt under pressure to do that. So you didn't pursue that February complaint. And then on the 12th of March, the Home Office had evidently asked Brookhouse for an update on your condition. And Dr. Uzarali's response it's at tab 9, Chair. And if we can have it on screen at HOM 032406. It's from Dr. Uzarali, and it says, Dear Home Office, in response to the Home Office inquiry, the detainee is fit for detention. We believe he is getting adequate care. He is not on any medication. He remains fit to fly. Is it correct that at this point, so March 2018, you weren't on medication or you weren't taking medication?
Sorry?
Is it right to say that in March 2018 you weren't taking medication?
I think by then I stopped. I didn't trust. And I think I stopped going to the centre.
So
I don't exactly remember.
Had you been sort of weaned off your medication? Had there been a plan to stop, or was it that you just hadn't been decided not to take it?
I didn't want to go into the into the med centre anymore because of all of what happened. I just didn't want to get reminded of what I've been through in there, and I decided to stop. But that report that you just talked about said I was fit to fly. I did not know anything about that until I read my monthly report, so that didn't come to me.
Was going to the healthcare centre the only way to get your medication?
Yeah.
And 11 days later, on the 23rd of March, you wrote the letter of complaint that we just looked at, which is dated the 22nd of March 2018. And there's an urgent fax from Dr. Chowdhury to the Home Office. Can we have a look at this on the screen? It's HOM 032403, and Chair, is at tab 11 of the hard copy bundle. So this is from Dr. Chowdhury, marked as urgent. And it says, I've spoken at length to the above detainee. Information has been reviewed in light of his PTSD symptoms and diagnosis. He is in need of specialist help from PTSD clinics. This is not available in detention. He is therefore not fit for detention. And it says there he's spoken at length to you. I think your statement says that you had a meeting on the 22nd of March, or maybe that this is from the 22nd of March, but in fact both the meeting and the fax are on the same day, 23rd of March. Is it likely that the long discussion he described there was the meeting that you had about your complaint on the 23rd of March?
I think so.
And you discussed this at 211 of your statement, if you need to remind yourself, so page 62. You discuss a meeting with Sandra Calver, Head of Healthcare present, and Dr. Chowdhury. You can see from the consultation information sheet the meeting was with Dr. Sandra Calver and Dr. Chowdhury, and then there's notes of the meeting there that were taken by Dr. Chowdhury. You say that you discussed at this meeting your condition, that you'd showed Dr. Uzarali your reports and you felt that he wasn't interested, and it's recorded that you stopped coming to healthcare because he feels no one is listening. Is that all accurate?
Yes.
And it's recorded here, as you know, that you were happy with the way the complaint had been handled. Is that accurate?
I think so. I'm not exactly sure. But when the lady came down, the head of healthcare, I felt at least some effort was being made.
And the outcome of this was that they would consider your reports.
Yeah.
And as we can see here, also Dr. Chowdhury wrote to the Home Office to say you weren't fit for detention. The Home Office then asked for more information following his fax. We have the correspondence in your witness statement. And if we turn to HOM 032401, please. This is at tab 10. This is a letter 3 days later from Dr. Uzarali. It's quite long. I won't read it in full. It says that Brookhouse knew about your diagnosis since admission. It says that you were last seen and assessed by a psychiatrist in June 2016. But as you say in your statement, in fact, you'd seen Professor Fox in July 2017. It states that you've been repeatedly offered general and mental health and emotional support group appointments, which you'd failed or refused to attend. Is it right to say that you had been offered some support that you didn't engage with?
That's the same group thing that I told you was affecting me.
Yeah.
I did attend it. I just stopped because it was doing me worse than good.
It says that you've disengaged with healthcare apart from to make Rule 35 requests and in relation with your immigration status.
That isn't true. I only disengaged with them after I stopped touch them. But if you notice throughout my report, I've been going to them all the time.
It says that you had stopped taking medication for the past 2 weeks. But you say in your statement, by this point you'd restarted, and I think you say that the nurses had agreed to bring it to your room.
Yes.
Was that something that was agreed at the meeting with the head of healthcare present?
No.
When was that agreed?
They started come when they noticed that I wasn't coming back.
It states that release from detention prompted by Rule 35 would only be merited if you were able to access PTSD treatment. And I think there's a concern that sometimes you can't get that on the NHS.
I've never really heard that one, but it's very weird because all of the treatment that I got is me who asked for it from outside. So if I could do that in detention center, you can imagine what I could do if I was outside.
And did you mainly get that from charitable organisations?
Yes.
Did you ever pay for it privately while you were at Brookhouse?
No.
And it finally notes that your general mental well-being would be better if you were released, but it notes that you were fit to fly. And on that same day, your adult at risk level was raised to level 3.
Yeah, so a couple of days he said to me that I wasn't fit to fly. And then he ambushed me and right to my caseworker that I was fit to fly, but he didn't inform me. And I was his patient.
Is that Dr. Uzarali
Yeah.
or Dr. Chowdhury?
One of them, I don't remember which one.
Yeah. You do mention in your statement a fit to fly assessment with Dr. Chowdhury as well. So we have a record of that.
Yeah, so I think I had this assessment. He said I wasn't fit to fly. And then I read in my statement, oh, this guy told me that I'm not fit to fly. He's saying that to somebody else. You're a doctor. You have to tell the truth. You can't say one thing 4 days and in a couple of days later, without me going back to you, you change your mind and say something else.
Thank you. We can take that off the screen now. Thank you. So your statement and also a written complaint, which was made near the same time, states that there was a lock-in between 26th of March and 27th of March. So I'm going to move on to that now and ask you about that and move on from the Rule 35. This is covered in your statement at 225 onwards, page 69, under a heading lock-in. So you've now been told that this was to conduct a drug search and the rooms were locked between 9 p.m. on the 26th of March and about 1:30 p.m. the following day. Is that what you recall?
So we normally get open, I think, around 8 o'clock in the morning. So, and then we go out for breakfast. So this morning, none of the room open. And nobody get no information of what was going on because I think they had an operation to have a search. People started to get upset because the breakfast time came and they didn't get released, so there was extra banging, which was really bad. So all of us, we missed breakfast. So while we missed breakfast, they open us now because they finish around dinner time. Mm-hmm. We came out on the wing, people was really upset. And there's this young boy who was in detention center for quite some time. He appeared that he didn't have anybody. So I was walking. I went up to the office to talk to an officer. So I'm standing with the officer there, and I saw somebody bullying the guy, the young guy. So I'm looking at the officer to see if the officer is going to say something. So he didn't say nothing. So I tell him, "What are you doing? You can't do this. He's younger than you." And the guy started to approach me all the time in the presence of the officer. And I'm asking the officer, "Is this guy serious?" I'm saying, I probably he's joking, but he was serious. He wanted to attack me. So I saw him, he take up a pool ball from the table and have it in his hand, and he walked towards me. And then when I see that, I feel so threatened. I picked up a broomstick next to the officer. All the time, the officer was sitting there. So this situation didn't have to escalate like this if the officer had come in. When he reached up close, a lot of the detainee came and they part us, so nothing happened. life just go back as normal. Me and this guy, no problem. The officer who was sitting to me, he went off the wing, he came back and said, I have to go into isolation. So I said to him, what did I do? Because you are here to go into isolation. He said, I disrupted the wing. I said, I didn't even fight. I said, all I was doing, as you see, I was trying to not let this guy bully this guy. And you were here. You didn't have to let this escalate to that guy came with a pool ball. But you did, and this is the result of what happened. I said, I'm not going to because I haven't done anything wrong. If I had done anything wrong, I'd just go. You don't have to tell me. I'll just go. Okay, so they locked down after lunch. They locked down for the evening. Around 1 o'clock.
You said
around 4 o'clock, I think. Just before they locked down, I saw my cell open with guys with shields. So I know there's no sense that you fight here or try to do anything. So I opened my hand like this to say, like, I'm surrender. Before I could, somebody rushed in and hit me with the shield in my head, and I passed out.
Did they, just to stop you there, you said you were getting changed in your statement at the time when this happened, when they entered. Did they ask you to come with them again to E-Wing or to separation?
No, they came in emotion like they're ready for action, to my recollection.
And
So,
you give a list of names sorry to interrupt, at 235 of those who were potentially involved, although they're just said to be linked to the complaint. I think you couldn't see who they were, could you, because they were wearing
yeah, they were
protective
wearing,
gear? Okay, sorry to stop you. So you say that you were struck with a shield?
Yeah, I was struck with the shield in my head, and I feel my body going over, and I had no control. And I think I don't remember what happened then, so I assumed that I was passed out. But when I am coming around, I saw this mental nurse. I don't know. I don't think she's a mental nurse, but she's staying over me. She said to this word, his eye is open. He's okay. She didn't check to see if I have a concussion or anything. She said that. And straight away when she said that, they jumped on me again. And one again put his knee in my throat, and again put my hand behind my back. I started to scream for pain. It was really hurtful. And they put me into a scorpion motion with my foot back, and they tied me up. And 4 people were carrying me out of the door to the isolation. And every single door that I passed through, they'll hit me on the edge of the door deliberately. And I'm screaming, you're hitting me on the door. But they just hit me up through the door until they reach to this room. And when they reached to this room, they did exactly the same thing when they were tying me up, the reverse method. They put me down the same way, put their knee, and then they released me. And then I end up, and I think I'd done the same thing again, hitting my head on the wall. And by then, I think it was dinner time, but they locked me up. And in the morning, and during the night, I think they had somebody looking at me, watching me, because this time my emotion was up. And in the morning, for breakfast, I didn't get no lunch, no dinner the evening before, and I didn't get no breakfast in the morning. And I'm trying to tell them, well, you haven't fed me, I'm hungry. In the room, I think they take out all the necessary things that they think that I could commit suicide with. And at lunchtime, I think either I get feed on the lunch or the evening. I'm not sure, but it was quite a long time before I got feed.
And you say in your statement you were very traumatised by both the removal and you guess about 17 hours that you spent on your own in isolation after that. I think your statement suggests that you complained about it through your solicitor on this occasion, 26th of April 2018. And your solicitor's also requested footage of the event shortly after, but you've never received that. And you said that your complaint was rejected. Yeah,
so after I made the complaint, they came to the room. One of the officers again with the tie. And I think, I'm not 100% sure if there's an immigration representative was there. But they said, we have looked at the footage and they didn't think that the officer done anything wrong. That's what they told me.
Was that immediately after or sometime
after that. I
Um,
think the next day, I think.
And you note in your statement, you've given us the full account and you've helped us with it again today. You say that firstly there was no need to remove you because the altercation had finished and you were getting changed to, I think, were you working as a welfare orderly at that time?
I used to, I think, work in the library.
Oh.
Yeah.
And secondly, that you say in your statement you were upset that no consideration was made of the fact that you had PTSD, so how you might be affected by removal in sort of full protective gear by surprise. Turning then to your release, eventually, I mentioned earlier that you had 3 grants of conditional bail. The last one was made on the 23rd of March 2018, and your solicitor had chased for an update on that grant of bail and asked what steps had been taken to effect it. Had no response and chased again on the 13th of April, again with no response. Then issued a judicial review on the 3rd of May 2018. An expedited hearing was listed, and before that hearing you were released on the 8th of May 2018. So by that date, not counting the 3 earlier periods of detention there, you'd been at Brookhouse uninterrupted for 16 and a half months, and you'd been in immigration detention generally for 20 months, approximately. As you'd been released by then, the claim that you had brought to the judicial review I mentioned about your detention effectively became a claim for damages for unlawful detention. And on the 5th of November 2019, by consent, that claim was settled for a payment, although the Home Office hadn't acknowledged which part of detention, if any, was unlawful, and you had received no apology, as far as I understand, either. The final thing I wanted to ask about then is the impact of your detention at Brookhouse on you after you left. So it's in your statement, pages 79 to 80, from paragraph 259 to 262. If you have nothing else you wish to add about it, that's fine. But in your statement, you note that you found it particularly hard to engage with health professionals after you left. Is that right? Why was that?
Because I keep, one of the things with PTSD, when something happened to you more than one time, you don't trust that situation again until you could actually trust that person. So if I don't spend some time with a person that I can trust, it's very difficult for me to participate in anything.
Did it affect your ability to seek ongoing treatment for your PTSD?
The first initial stage, yes. I've been seeing a healthcare, and then when I was seeing her, I felt like I didn't get out of that detention state of mind. And then I think when she write the final report on me, she will mention more about my conviction instead of my actual, and I was so upset, I was angry, and I changed.
So you did seek some assistance from a veterans organisation, I think, as well, a charity.
I've been getting therapy for over nearly 3 years now, which probably helped me to be able to come here now and talk like this.
And you say that treatment hasn't just been focused on what happened to you when you were serving in the military, but also on the events that happened to you during the time at Brookhouse. Yeah. Is that right? And you say that you continue to have flashbacks and memories of things that happened to you when you were at Brookhouse as well.
Yes. Even weekly as well, because I have to go to a police station to sign on weekly. Yes. And that every time I go there, I always think that I'll probably get sent back there.
Thank you. That's all that I had on my list of things to ask you about. The chair may have some questions to ask you as well, so I'm going to ask.
Thank you very much, sir, for your evidence. Just one brief question. From your time in Brookhouse, do you remember having any positive engagement with staff members? Did you have anybody that you felt you could trust and turn to, whether medical staff or officers?
Well, there's a lot of, a few persons there who was sympathetic with people that you can able to go and talk to. For instance, the guy that make this inquiry works. I didn't know him, but for some reason, I used to go into the library and we used to have good conversation. because I felt at the time he treated us like, I'll give you an example, ma'am. At the moment, I'm working with an organization, a charity organization, where I work with homeless people and I work with ex-convict. So I go to Clark's House weekly and talk about them, about how to try to make their life a little bit better and try something new. And one of the things that I find out is that they recognize rejection because they accept there's us and there's them. So in Brookhouse, that was the culture. The way you get treated is that the officers will talk about us as they. And it's the same thing I saw in Clark's house. So one of the things that I try to do in Clark's house is to make them feel like there's not us or they, it's we are. So this guy, when I go, he made me feel exactly, and this is where I learned kind of that from and how to treat people. So there's a few officers there that used to have a conversation with you, but they felt because of, and this is what I heard from some of the officers, because some of the officers complained to me, and they said, well, I came here to work, but I didn't expect the situation because I'm doing things that I don't feel comfortable of doing, but I don't want to lose my job, so I have to do the things that I don't feel comfortable with. But particularly with that guy, I felt that he used to listen and he used to help as much as he can. So when I saw the inquiry and I was inside, I was like, wow. But I was surprised that I point him out when I don't even know that he was not that type of person. It's just because of the approach.
Thank you. Thank you. I have no other questions. I'm very grateful for you coming and spending your time and giving evidence to the inquiry. Thank you very much, sir.
Chair, it's I think about 12:20. I wonder, we've got some reading in this afternoon. It might be a good time to take an early lunch for about an hour and then return for reading in following that, so we have some time to move around and get ready for that.
Indeed, so we'll return at 1:20. Thank you very much. Thank you.